The year is 2012. A young woman named Dr. Eris Thorne sits in a basement office. The office is at the State University's agricultural extension. It smells of old paper and dust. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. On her screen is a map, a satellite map of Pine Ridge County, colored by crop yield data. It shows 30 years of alfalfa seed production. From 1980 to 2010, most of the county is a predictable patchwork, green for good years, yellow for decent years, patches of orange for drought. But in the center of the valley, there is an anomaly, a circle, a near-perfect circle, 10 miles in radius. And inside that circle, the color is a deep, impossible blue. Blue means yields that are not just good, they are statistically improbable. 40% higher than the county average, 50% in some years, consistently, for 3 decades. Her algorithm flagged it as an error, a data corruption, but she checked the raw numbers. The numbers were real. Township records, co-op receipts, USDA filings. It was not an error. It was a fact. She zooms in on the epicenter of the blue circle, Lot 74, a single farm. The name on the plat map reads Blackwood, S. She types the name into a search engine. Not much comes up, just old tax records. Then she tries the county newspaper archives. She types Blackwood and alfalfa. One result. A small article from the Pine Ridge Gazette, dated June 4th, 1968. The headline is about new aerial spraying services. It quotes a local pilot, a man named Frank Miller. He talks about progress. He talks about fighting the weevil. He praises the farmers who have signed up. All of them, he says, except one. The quote is at the very end of the article. Dr. Thorne leans closer to her screen. She reads the words aloud to the empty room. There's a young man, Silas Blackwood, just took over his grandfather's place. A good kid from a good family. But he's got some old ideas about chemicals. He refused the spray. I told him he was being foolish. I told him he'd lose his crop by July. Frank said he hoped the boy would come to his senses. He said he was just trying to protect him from a mistake. Dr. Thorne goes silent. She looks back at the map on her other screen, at the impossible blue circle. A 30-year anomaly, centered on the farm of the foolish young man, who was told he would fail, and who, it seems, did not. This is one of those stories, a story about a quiet man, a kind warning, and a decision that changed the land for a generation. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, if you believe in the quiet power of conviction, then subscribe to this channel, because we find the truth buried in the archives. We tell the stories of those who prove the world wrong. Let me tell you about Silas Blackwood. It begins in the spring of 1968. Silas was 24 years old. His hands were already calloused, his face already mapped by the sun. He had just buried his grandfather 6 months prior. The farm was his now. 160 acres of alfalfa and clover. And the bees, 50 hives, tucked into the cottonwood grove behind the old barn. His grandfather's bees. The old man had called them the soul of the farm. Not the engine, not the workers, the soul. He said the land remembers what you put on it. He said the bees are the keepers of that memory. Silas believed him. That spring, the alfalfa weevil came early. It came hard. You could see the leaves turning to lace. The old-timers nodded grimly. A bad year, they said. But then came the news. Frank Miller had bought a new plane, a beautiful Boeing Stearman biplane, surplus from the war, fitted with spray booms under the wings. He was starting an aerial application business. He could cover 100 acres in an hour. He was selling progress. He was selling certainty. The chemical was called malathion. It was a miracle, they said. It would kill the weevil dead. Every farmer in the valley signed up. They met at the Grange Hall. Frank stood at the front of the room. He was a good man. Everyone knew Frank Miller. He'd flown in the Pacific, coached Little League, served on the church board. His voice was calm and reasonable. He laid out the costs, the application schedule, the expected results. It all made perfect sense. A signature on a piece of paper, a check for the service, and the problem would be gone. Silas sat in the back. He listened. He didn't say a word. When the meeting was over, Frank found him by the door. "Silas," he said, his hand on the young man's shoulder, "I didn't see your name on the list." Silas looked at the floor. "I'm not spraying, Frank." Frank's smile was patient. He was a man used to explaining things to people for their own good. "Son, I know what your granddad taught you. He was a fine man, a man of his time. But times change. This weevil is different. It will wipe you out. I've seen it happen over in the next county." Silas met his eyes. "I can't spray the fields, Frank. It'll kill the bees." Frank let out a slow breath, the kind of breath a father uses with a stubborn child. "We can spray at dusk," he said, "when the bees are back in the hive. The risk is very low." "It's a risk I can't take." Silas's voice was quiet, but it was not uncertain. Frank's posture changed. His kindness became more focused, more urgent. "Listen to me, Silas. I've been farming and flying in this valley for 25 years. I am not going to be the man who stands by and watches you lose your family's farm. Your father was my friend. Your grandfather taught me how to hunt. I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this for you." It was the most dangerous kind of argument. It wasn't an attack. It was an offer of protection. It wasn't fueled by greed. It was fueled by genuine concern. Certainty, delivered with kindness, is a hard thing to fight. You can't meet it with anger. You can't dismiss it as foolishness. It wraps you in a blanket of reason. Frank continued, "Every one of your neighbors is on board. If you don't spray, your fields will become a breeding ground. You'll be hurting them too. Think about that. Think about your responsibility to the community." He thought he had him. It was the final, logical move. But Silas just shook his head, a small, slow movement. "My responsibility is to this farm, to my grandfather, to the bees. I'm sorry, Frank. My answer is no." Frank Miller stepped back. He looked at Silas for a long moment. There was no anger in his eyes. There was something worse. Pity. He saw a young man blinded by sentiment, a boy about to lose everything for a principle that didn't pay the bills. "All right, son," he said, his voice soft. "I can't make you. But when you see those fields turning brown in July, don't be too proud to call me. It'll be late, but maybe we can save some of it." He turned and walked away. The other farmers watched Silas leave. They shook their heads. "A shame," one of them said. "He'll learn the hard way." That night, Silas sat in his grandfather's chair. The farmhouse was silent. He could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the old wood. He pulled a dusty ledger from the bookshelf, his grandfather's journal. The last entry was from a year before he died. The handwriting was shaky, but the words were clear. "They brought a new spray today. The salesman had a shiny tie and a fast tongue. Said it would kill everything but the crop. I told him that was the problem. He didn't understand. The bees know the way. The bees know the difference between what helps and what hurts. They are the truth of the land. Trust the bees. Silas closed the book. He placed it on the table. The doubt from the Grange Hall still echoed in the room. The pity in Frank Miller's eyes, the certainty of his own failure. But his grandfather's words were quieter and stronger. The bees know the way. He stood up and walked out into the cool night air. He walked to the cottonwood grove. The 50 hives stood in neat rows, silent sentinels in the moonlight. He could hear the low collective hum from within, a sound of life, of purpose. He placed his hand on the lid of the nearest hive. He could feel the vibration, the warmth of thousands of bodies working in the dark. He made a promise that night, not to his grandfather's memory, but to the living souls in that box. I will not poison your world. We will find another way. The next morning, the work began. It was not a single heroic act. It was 1,000 small, tedious ones. He remembered things his grandfather had done, things the modern farmers had dismissed as folk wisdom. First, the ladybugs. He spent a week walking the creek beds, searching under milkweed and thistle, collecting ladybugs in a canvas bag. His neighbors saw him. They thought he'd lost his mind. He released them at dawn in his alfalfa fields, a tiny, spotted army against a tide of weevils. Then, the lacewings. He learned their life cycle from an old book. He built breeding boxes from scrap lumber and mesh screen. He filled them with potato sprouts to attract the aphids the lacewing larvae fed on. It was slow, frustrating work. More failed than hatched, but he got a few hundred to take hold. He bought 10 gallons of molasses, mixed it with water and borax, sprayed it not on the plants, but on wooden stakes hammered every 20 feet. A sweet trap for the ants that protected the weevils. He drove his tractor day and night, but not to till the soil deep. He cultivated shallow, just enough to disrupt the weevil larvae pupating in the topsoil, a technique that took more time, more fuel, more precision. In June, Frank Miller's Stearman became a fixture in the sky. Twice a week it roared over the valley, a graceful, deadly bird. It would fly over Silas's property line, bank sharply, and then the fine mist would fall over his neighbor's land, a chemical curtain dividing his farm from the rest of the world. Silas would stop his work. He would watch the plane. He felt a strange mix of resentment and fear. The fear that Frank was right. The fear that this was all for nothing. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend. By someone who genuinely believed they were saving you from yourself. It's a lonely place to be, because their certainty becomes a voice in your own head, a constant whisper of doubt. If you've ever felt that, let me know in the comments. Tell me about the voice you had to overcome. Because what happened next on Silas's farm is a testament to quiet resolve. Let me tell you about the next few years. By July, his fields didn't look good. The leaves were chewed. The growth was stunted compared to his neighbors. Frank Miller drove by one afternoon. He didn't stop. He just slowed his truck, looked across the fence, and shook his head with that same sad, knowing pity. The story in the valley was set. Silas Blackwood was going to fail. But then the bloom came. His alfalfa wasn't as tall, but it flowered, and his bees, with no other clean forage for miles, descended on it. They worked from sunup to sundown. The fields hummed with a sound the other farms had lost, the sound of life. That fall, the yields were tallied at the co-op. His neighbors brought in beautiful, tall stalks of alfalfa, heavy with hay. But Silas wasn't selling hay. He was selling seed, pollinated seed. His yield was 20% lower than the year before. He lost money, but he didn't lose the farm. The co-op manager looked at the numbers. He told Silas he was lucky. Next year, the weevil will get you for good. But the next year, something was different. The ladybug population had exploded. The lacewings were established. The shallow cultivation had broken the pest cycle. The weevils were still there, but they were not a plague. They were just part of the system. His crop was healthier, and his bees were thriving. Frank Miller still flew. The neighbors still sprayed. But Silas's farm was an island of buzzing, vibrant life. That year, his seed yield was 10% higher than his grandfather's best year. He broke even. He paid his property taxes. Cash. He bought a new set of tires for his truck. Cash. It wasn't a victory speech. It was a receipt. The quietest, most powerful argument there is. And now the story begins to accelerate, because this is where one man's conviction becomes a force of nature. The year is 1972. The farm next door goes up for sale. Old man Hemlock passed away. His kids wanted to sell. 80 acres. Silas goes to the bank. The loan officer is the same man who approved the loans for the sprayers. He looks at Silas's books. He sees low input costs, no chemical bills, no application fees. He sees a steady profit. He approves the loan. Silas buys the 80 acres. He immediately stops the spraying. He plants a 5-acre buffer of wildflowers and buckwheat, forage for his bees. The year is 1975. His hive count is now 100. He is selling honey. Pure, light alfalfa honey. A health food store in the city wants all he can produce. They test it. 0 chemical residue. They offer him a premium price, a 10-year contract. He buys a new honey extractor, stainless steel, paid in cash. He hires a local kid part-time to help him. The kid's father is one of the farmers who sprays. The father tells his son not to get any funny ideas. The year is 1980. Silas's farm is now a landmark. People call it the bee farm. His original 160 acres are deep green. The purchased 80 are recovering. The soil is coming back to life. Another farm goes on the market. 120 acres on his southern border. The owner is retiring. He's been spraying for 12 years. His yields are flat. His soil is compacted. His input costs keep rising. He sells to Silas. No bank this time. Silas pays for it himself. Cash. Frank Miller still flies his Stearman. He's older now. His hair is gray. He sees the expanding patch of deep, healthy green. He sees the new barn Silas built. He sees the second truck. He doesn't wave. He just watches from his lonely seat in the sky, a quiet witness to the thing he was so sure could not happen. By now, the change is starting to ripple outwards. The farmers closest to Silas's land notice something. Their own seed yields are ticking up, just a little, 5%, then 8%. They don't understand why. They attribute it to better fertilizer, a new variety of seed, good weather. They never once look at the thousands of bees crossing their fence lines. Silas's bees, foraging farther and farther, pollinating their crops for free. A quiet subsidy they don't even know they're receiving. Silas knows. He sees his bees on their clover. He sees them in their orchards. He never says a word. The year is 1985. Silas now owns 400 acres. He has 200 hives. He is one of the largest alfalfa seed producers in the state, and the only one who is certified organic. A title that meant nothing in 1968, but means everything now. He starts selling his own queen bees, bred from his grandfather's original stock. They are hardy. They are resilient. They are genetically adapted to thrive without chemical support. Other beekeepers want them. They are willing to pay a premium. He ships them across the country. each queen in a tiny wooden box with a few attendants, a genetic ambassador from the farm that wasn't supposed to survive. The contrast math is undeniable now. Silas's cost per acre is 30% lower than his neighbor's. His fuel cost is higher because of the cultivation, but he has no chemical bill. None. His profit margin per acre is 50% higher. The numbers don't lie. They are cold. They are hard. They are the final word in the argument that started in the Grange Hall 17 years ago. And then, the world changed. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow-motion catastrophe, a tiny parasite, the Varroa destructor mite. It arrived in America in the late 1980s. It swept through the country's beehives like a fire. It was devastating. Beekeepers who had relied on chemical treatments for years suddenly found themselves helpless. The mites were resistant. The chemicals killed the mites. But they also weakened the bees. The hives collapsed. The industry was in crisis. In Pine Ridge County, the effect was stark. The wild bee population, already weakened by years of spraying, was wiped out. The managed hives of local beekeepers died off. By 1992, the sound of buzzing was rare. The farmers who had relied on free, wild pollination for their orchards and vegetable gardens saw their yields crash. They started renting hives from commercial pollinators, an expense they had never known. But Silas's bees were different. They were not untouched by the mite. He lost hives too, but his bees were stronger. Their genetic diversity, their clean forage, their robust immune systems, they had a fighting chance. He didn't use harsh miticides. He used old techniques, drone brood removal, screened bottom boards. He worked 18-hour days. He saved his stock. While the valley fell silent, his farm was still humming. And that is when the reckoning came. It was a Tuesday morning in the fall of 1995. Silas was in his workshop, repairing hive boxes. A truck he didn't recognize pulled into the lane. An old man got out. He walked with a stiff gait. His shoulders were slumped. It was Frank Miller. He was 75 years old. He had retired from flying 5 years earlier. He looked small without his airplane. Silas came out of the workshop, wiping his hands on a rag. He waited. Frank stopped 10 feet away. He looked at the new barn, the neat rows of hives in the distance, the healthy, green fields. He looked at Silas's calm, weathered face. He took off his old cap and held it in his hands. "My son-in-law," Frank began, his voice raspy. "He bought the old Johnson place. Trying to make a go of it. Apples. He had a good crop this year, but the blossoms, they just fell off. No fruit. The extension agent said it was a pollination failure, said there aren't enough bees left." He paused. It was hard for him to say the next words. "He told my son-in-law to come see you. Told him you were the only one left with strong bees." Silas didn't speak. He just listened. This was not a moment for triumph. It was a moment of profound sadness. A man's certainty had crumbled, and it had taken him 27 years to walk a few miles to admit it. Frank finally looked at Silas. His eyes were watery. "He wants to know if he can rent some hives from you for next spring. He'll pay whatever you ask." The air was still. A bee buzzed past Frank's head. He flinched. Here, in this moment, was the victory. The chance for Silas to say, "I told you so." The chance to remind him of the Grange Hall, of the pity, of the foolish young man. He could have refused. He could have named a price so high it was an insult. but his grandfather's voice was still there. The bees know the way, and the way was not vengeance. Silas nodded. "Tell him to come by on Saturday," he said. "We'll talk." And then he said the quiet, devastating thing, the line that rewrote their entire history. And Frank. "The honey is on me this year, a gift, for all the years you watched over my farm from the sky." Frank Miller put his cap back on. He couldn't speak. He just nodded, turned, and walked back to his truck. He had come for a business transaction. He left carrying the weight of a grace he had not earned. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is, because when you win, there is no celebration, only a quiet, shared understanding of a long and painful waste. But that is not the end of the story, because a legacy is not what you build for yourself. It's what you leave for others. Silas's son-in-law got his bees. So did 3 other farmers that year. Silas didn't rent them. He taught them. He spent that winter holding workshops in his barn. He taught them how to keep their own bees, how to manage pests without poison, how to see their farms as a whole system, not just a crop. He gave them each a starter hive, with one of his queens. He called it the Pine Ridge Pollinator Project. It started with 3 farmers. Within 10 years, there were 50. The 10-mile blue circle on the yield map began to spread. The valley started to hum again. Frank Miller passed away in 2001. His obituary in the Pine Ridge Gazette mentioned his service in the war, his years coaching Little League, his founding of the aerial spray service that modernized farming in the valley. At the end, his daughter added a line. It said he was also a friend of Silas Blackwood, and a great admirer of his bees. Silas, now in his 70s, established a scholarship at the State University, the Blackwood Grant for Sustainable Agriculture. It goes to a student researching non-chemical pest management. The first recipient was a young woman with a passion for data. Her name was Dr. Eris Thorne. She used the grant money to fund the research that produced the map that started this whole story. She found the truth in the numbers. The story of a man who trusted something older than science, who endured the certainty of others, who worked for decades not to be right, but to be true. True to the land, true to his grandfather, true to the bees. Today, if you visit the farm, Silas is long gone. His granddaughter runs it now. The farm is over 1,000 acres. The hives number 500. The honey contract is with a national chain. But in the old workshop, on a shelf above the workbench, sits a small wooden box. It is weathered and gray. The corners are worn smooth. It's a queen-rearing box, the one Silas's grandfather built with his own hands in the 1930s. It is the physical artifact of their belief, a testament to a quiet promise made between a man and his bees. His granddaughter still uses it. She says it reminds her where they came from. She says it reminds her that the most innovative ideas are sometimes the oldest ones, the ones we forgot in our rush for an easy answer. The story of Silas Blackwood is not about bees. It's about a different kind of sight. The ability to see a complex, living system where others see only a problem to be sprayed away. It's about the quiet courage to stand against the tide of well-meaning, reasonable, and absolutely certain people. The ones who are trying to protect you. Right now, somewhere in the world, a young person is being told they are foolish. A young woman is being told her idea is impossible. A young man is being told to give up and get in line. They are being told this by good people, by parents, by teachers, by bosses, by people who are certain they know the limits of what is possible. This story is for them. It's proof that the world can be changed by a quiet refusal. by decades of patient work, by trusting the small, humming voice that tells you there is another way. If this story means something to you, if you believe in the power of quiet conviction, subscribe to this channel. We will keep telling these stories. And share this one. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they are not foolish. They are just ahead of their time. Share it with someone who needs to hear the hum of the bees over the roar of the crowd. Because sometimes the soul of a place is worth more than the certainty of an age. And the bees, they always know the way.